Really quick on how to go through an entire sale from beginning to end and how to close the client. Now I'm going to touch on a few points here, but the main thing that I want you guys to know is the psychology behind everything you do. So before we even start through the script that I would use when I was selling, and in this example, we're going to be using a live transfer, but you could use this for any type of sale, really, whether it's final expense, mortgage protection, or IUL leads, inbound or outbound. The main thing, the most important thing is you got to be extremely intentional with your words from the moment that you get on the phone. Remember, you want to build trust. The moment you get on that call, you need to make sure that they know that you're an expert. So being intentional with your words is going to make the job a lot easier when it gets at the end, when you get to the end of the interaction, you're ready to close the deal. Now, I will tell you this training I'm about to do is exactly what I did to sell. And if I got a client to the point where I'm presenting pricing, I would close 90% of the people that I spoke with. Everybody didn't get to that point, but if I got that far, I was closing the deal. The 10% that I didn't close was either because there really wasn't a sale to be made, or they just really truly couldn't qualify. And I mean, they couldn't qualify. Maybe they were too young with really bad medical conditions that wasn't a guaranteed issue product, something of that nature. The vast majority of what we did, we closed. So working live transfers, man, when a call came in, the first thing you want to do is you want to identify if you're dealing with a prospect or a suspect. What I mean by that is you want to make sure that the client you have on the phone is a shopper, especially in live transfers, because with live transfers, a lot of these you have either a buffer where you could qualify the client in the beginning. And if not a buffer, they do have a refund policy where, like, if for whatever reason a lead slipped through the cracks and it wasn't really looking for insurance, then you could ask for a refund, but they look at talk time and things of that nature. So if you spend 15 minutes on the phone with a client that wasn't really a prospect, they're not going to refund you for that lead. So the first thing you want to do is qualify them. So when the call came in, man, I'd say something down the lines of like, hello, Bob. Hey, Bob, this is Joseph, your independent insurance broker that's going to be assisting you today. Bob, it is my understanding that you're looking for life insurance quotes today. Is that correct? Bob was going to say yes or no. If he said no, thank you, Bob, for your time, but you're in the wrong department. You get off the phone. If they said yes, the following line after that would be like, okay, Bob, perfect. Now, Bob, let me ask you, have you been shopping around for insurance, or is this the first time that you're looking into quotes? Now, when I would ask those questions, the reason I would ask the question is because I want to find out why they haven't shopped. So I would ask something down the lines of like, hey, Bob, what has prevented you from purchasing a policy this far? Has it been pricing? Has it been a hard time qualifying for something? And typically they'll come back and tell you either pricing or they didn't qualify. Those are the two main reasons. And off rip, now you know probably the main objection because they've talked to other people and they haven't. Those are the objections they didn't overcome. Remember, you want to overcome objections before you actually get to them. So if they said pricing, I wouldn't even dig deeper into the price, but now I know this person is budget conscious. So the majority of my conversation, going back to being intentional, I'm going to be talking about how affordable we can make things. I'm going to be looking for the most affordable product. I'm going to be very intentional with words throughout my interaction, bringing up that my main concern, my main goal today is to find something that is affordable for them. If they say qualify, then the same thing. I will make it a point to talk about how I work with multiple carriers, how I've been able to help people with a lot of conditions in the past for them to feel comfortable. Again, I want to overcome the objections before they come, and this is a really good way to figure out what the main objection is. If they said that once they answer that question, or if they told me that this is their first time shopping around, I will kind of give them a quick summary of what we're going to do today. Because remember, you want to be in control, so you want to walk the client through what the interaction and the conversation is going to look like. So I would say something like, hey, listen, okay, fantastic. Well, here's the deal, Bob. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm an independent broker. I work with over 30 of the carriers here in the States. All of them are A or A plus rated, what basically means that when you pass away, they pay Bob. That's what we want to look for. What we're going to do today, Bob, is I'm essentially going to do a medical assessment, nothing too invasive, but I'm going to do a health assessment with you. And then based off the answers you give me, I'm going to plug that in here to my database. And you and I together, we're going to search through all the carriers in the marketplace, the 30 plus that we work with, to figure out what the most affordable and the one that you will qualify for is. Once we have that, Bob, then we're gonna walk you through your options, and when an option makes sense, then we'll go ahead and submit an application and see if we lock in an approval. Does that make sense, Bob? Now, if you notice, I'm asking, does that make sense? And Steban and Alex, who are behind camera here, are nodding their heads, because something else that you want to do, this is a quick point, is you want to get somebody to say yes 6 times in a call. So if you get them in the rhythm, I guess I would say, of saying yes throughout the questions, doing things as asking questions as does that make sense, or does that sound good, or is that fair? Now you're getting them in the habit of saying yes. By the time you get to closing the deal, they're more than likely going to say yes. So I'm looking for 6 yeses throughout my interaction. Now at this point is when I get to doing the health assessment. Now the health assessment is a part that is very underrated. A lot of people make the mistake of simply asking, hey, listen, Bob, do you have any major medical conditions? No. And then they kind of just move forward. You don't want to do that for 2 reasons. One, because you're letting them know that it's easy to qualify for this if they're healthy. And you don't want to do that because just basic human psychology, again, going back to being intentional from the beginning, if you can easily get something, it makes it less important. If it's less important, you're less likely to get it. Right? Remember, your number one goal is always to help the client, and the way you help the client and help yourself is by getting them protected. But the other reason is because a lot of people will tell you they're actually healthy when they're not, because they think that taking 37 prescriptions, it's equivalent to being healthy because they have things under control, and that obviously is not the case. So then you're gonna pitch the wrong product, give a pricing, and then you find out they don't qualify, and it's really hard to kind of go backwards at that point and try to pivot into something that's more expensive because they're not healthy. And at that point, you're probably going to lose the deal. So the medical assessment, you want to be as detailed and go as much in depth as you possibly can. So you're going to go through the entire assessment that you have in your script, ask each and every medical question, ask things such as what medication they're taking for that condition, how often they do it, how long ago were they diagnosed, pretty much everything that they ask on the application. You want to go through that in the assessment, and you want to build that doubt so they know that this is not easy to qualify for. Remember, you're always one doctor visit or one prescription away from not qualifying for life insurance. So it's very important that we get that across to them. And if you do it too pushy, telling them that, it might come off as a strategy for you to sell them. The best way for you to do it in a subtle way is just digging deep and going really deep in the health assessment. Boom, perfect. We did the health assessment. Now, once I finish the health assessment, a lot of these clients don't even know what they want, right? So especially with life transfers, they just want insurance. You don't know what their understanding of insurance is. And something that I learned that is really important is that the first thing that comes out of your mouth when you're giving an option, whether that including the pricing and or the product, meaning the coverage amount, that's who you become. What do I mean by that? If you tell them it's $50,000 for $100, you're now the $50,000 for $100 agent. And if that is very far off from what they're looking at, it doesn't matter if you could even get closer to what they want. At that point, a wall of resistance is going to come up, and you're not going to close them because you're the $50 for $100,000 coverage agent, and that's not who you want to be. So what I suggest you guys do is you're going to ask the agent first and foremost, regardless of their medical conditions, if they know the difference between a term policy and a permanent policy. Permanent could be whole life or IUL depending on where you're at. Most clients are going to tell you yes or no. Regardless whether they say yes or no, you're going to explain to them the difference. Now, here's the key. You did the health assessment already. So you already more or less know which direction you're going to take them in. You're going to use that to your advantage. What do I mean by this? If it's somebody really young and maybe they're looking for, budget is the main concern because you uncover that throughout the interaction, you're going to push term. So I would explain something like, okay, well, let me explain to you how the difference between term and whole life is. Whole life, and I will start with the one that I'm not going to push. So give the option, but I'm not going to push that one. I'm going to push term because that's what this client really needs based on what they told me. And you always, again, back to being intentional. You want the last thing you say, you want it to be what they go with. So I start with whole life. Now explain to them that the permanent insurance whole life it's forever. But typically the way it works is it's more expensive because it's permanent and it has lower coverage amounts. So it's a little less popular for people in their age group. And then on the other hand, term is extremely affordable. You can get way higher coverage rates. And at your age, you can go as high as 30 years. And really what term is meant to for you, Bob, the 25-year-old, is that over the next 30 years, you're going to be protected while your daughter is growing up. So but in 30 years, your daughter will be 35. At that point, if something happens to you and what she needs you, what she's depending on you, you had a big policy that you were able to afford in place to take care of her. That makes sense? Perfect. So you're going to explain the two differences. Once you explain the two differences, they're going to tell you which one they like more automatically. And again, you're leading this conversation because you're in control. So when you're leading this conversation, they're going to tell you, yeah, I think term is the route I want to go with. Okay, fantastic. Now, let me ask you. You mentioned you have a daughter because that was part of the health questions and the uncovering part. Is that who we're looking to protect? Identify the beneficiary. When you identify the beneficiary, you're going to have to dig a little bit deep into what they're going to do with that money, because you want to make sure that they understand that how important this check is to their family. Now, if you got in this far and you're in control with the conversations, the odds are you're doing pretty well, and you're leading towards the close. But the moment of truth really happens when you come out with the pricing options. Now, what is recommended by everybody is that you give 3 options. And I suggest, especially if you're new, that you give 3 options. You want to give 3 options, but the first one that comes out of your mouth, remember, is what they're going to remember. So the way that I've always worked, I didn't actually give the 3 options. I just gave 1 option, and I would look for a number that I found to be not too cheap, because you don't want to be the cheapest guy on planet Earth, because then again, it makes it seem like it's not valuable, but not overly expensive. So if Bob qualifies for $500,000 for $82, even though I can probably get him $1 million for $140, which is affordable, I will start with $500,000. Listen, Bob, I have a couple companies in your area that seems like they will let us apply and it might take you. Let me show you what that looks like. And then I will go into the carrier itself. We're going to work with Mutual of Omaha. Have you heard of them? Yes or no, it doesn't really matter what they say. But Mutual of Omaha has been around for 100 plus years. They're A+ rated. They're one of the most popular carriers that we work with. What's important about being A+ rated, like I explained earlier, Bob, is that when you pass away, they're actually going to cut that check. That's extremely important. We don't want to work with a company that's going to give your family a lot of hassle to cut out the check when you pass away. And just to give you in perspective where we're at from a pricing standpoint, Mutual of Omaha is coming back at a $500,000 coverage for 30 years with living benefits. What living benefits means, Bob, is that if you pass away, if you get sick, you come down with a critical, chronic, or terminal illness, so you have a heart attack, stroke, if you're a cancer diagnosis, you'll be able to get up to 90% of the policy in life. Or if you pass away, they'll cut out that check for $500,000. The $500,000 is coming back at $84 a month, Bob, for 30 years. And you just shut the hell up at that point. Whoever's watched Wolf of Wall Street, there's a scene where, like, if you speak first, you lose. That's what happens at that point. You give the price and you just shut up, even if it gets awkward for a minute. Don't say anything. What you don't want to do is you don't want to compete against yourself. They say, well, okay, and you're like, well, I can go cheaper. Don't do that. Let them come back with a question, a concern, a yes, a no, a whatever. They're typically gonna either, if they like it, they're gonna be like, that sounds good. Let's go with that. Can you get me something more affordable? Can you get me? They'll tell you what they're looking for, but you don't want to lead them, because you're leading blindly. At that point, you don't know where their head's at. You said that one number. You know, in this scenario, it's an ideal scenario because they were young and you can go with an affordable policy, but you want to just be quiet. When I explain all the benefits, give the price and shut up. When they come back, at this point, I said I closed 90% if I got this far, and I did. This is typically when the objections come up. Now, here's the key to handling objections. Everybody watches a bunch of YouTube videos that you should all watch on handling objections and rebuttals. But the real key to handling an objection is understanding what the objection is and being able to isolate the true objection. What do I mean by that? If you were too expensive, they're probably not going to tell you I can afford it. A lot of people are ashamed of admitting they don't have the money or something in that down that line. So a lot of them will come up with something like, I need to talk to my wife. I need a couple of days to think about it. I want to keep shopping around. And the mistake that most agents make is they take whatever objection they gave you and then they go with that entire rebuttal. Well, you want to talk to your wife? Let's call her right now. And if he really wanted to talk to his wife, that probably would work, but he doesn't want to talk to his wife. He just doesn't want to pay the $85. Now, when somebody's giving you objections, you isolate it. Let's talk about that first. I'll get to my other point. So what you really want to do with that objection is you want to start guessing. It's typically it's one of 3 things. It's you're really far off on the pricing based on what they thought it was. 1, and they can afford it. 2, they can afford it, but they don't get paid for a couple of weeks, so they are not aware that you could push the payment out, and obviously you haven't brought that up because you don't want to bring it up prematurely. 3, they don't like you. If it's a third one, you're screwed. You're not going to sell it. If it's one of the other 2, you want to isolate. What would I do? The first thing I would do is like, okay, perfect, Bob. I know you want to go and talk to your wife. Now, can I give you a couple more options before we get off the phone so then you can discuss all these options with your wife, and that way you can, that way we're not jumping on a call back and forth. So I'm not fighting him. I'm not telling him to call his wife and 3-way her right now. I'm not telling him what is that you want to talk to her about, why, I'm just telling him, let me give you a couple more options. Are you interested in getting a couple more options so you could take those with you to your wife and you guys can make a decision together? If he says yes, now you know that you're far, or it's a pricing thing, right? You're far either on the coverage or on the premium, the monthly amount. So if he says, okay, sure, I'll be like, okay, do you want me to give you something higher in coverage, or are you looking for something, or you rather give you an option with a lower premium, something a little bit more affordable? Bam. Now you know what the objection is. Now you can get into the conversation. Okay, fantastic. What were you thinking? What is your budget? Because at this point, I never asked them what their budget was. I'm just being assumptive. They're going to tell you at this point, my budget is 40, 50, 60 bucks, but you're not asking out of left field where it doesn't like fit in. You want to have it naturally come up in the interaction. If they tell you, no, I don't want any more options, it's probably not a pricing option. They might say, no, the number is perfect, man. That sounds great. I just need to talk to my wife. Okay, fantastic. So here's what we'll do, man. Go talk to your wife. Is it okay if I follow up with you in a couple of days? He's gonna say yes, even if he probably never gonna answer that call. I'm like, okay, perfect, man. Okay, I have you scheduled to follow up with you next Thursday. Fantastic, Bob. Now, real quick, before we get off the phone, Bob, assuming that you come to a decision that you want to move forward with this policy with your wife for next Thursday, so I'm agreeing with you, and we both have an understanding that we're not doing this until next Thursday. Let me explain to you what would transpire then. At that point, we're going to submit that application to lock in that approval, because remember, we're not approved yet. And then if they come back with an approval, there's something in your state called a 30-day free look period. It's actually a law your state specifically of Texas has, which most states have it, but Illinois is for them, where you can actually submit the application, leverage that policy to get approved without having to make a payment, meaning you will still submit a formal payment. We're able to push out the payment date as far out as 30 days to make sure that you can know if you're approved. And that way, then you make the payment for whatever day is most comfortable for you. And a lot of people, believe it or not, are actually going to be like, oh, so we can move the payment out. Okay. What if if I do it now, I can pay it in 2 weeks? That happens more often than not, because a lot of times the issue was these are working class people that have money, and they're ashamed of telling you that, their account is about to overdraft this week, but they get paid in next Friday and they could do it then. Again, I'm doing that in a way where I'm just trying to isolate that objection. Typically, those two things you wanna know if it comes down to price or coverage, because typically that really is the case. Most people don't really need to talk to their wives for an $80 policy. Like, let's be real here. They spend $80 in Uber Eats every day, and they don't call their wife and ask. And they're doing something nice for their wife. Typically, that isn't the objection. It's more so from the standpoint of isolating it. 9 out of 10 times it comes down to money. If you can isolate the real objection, that you're now going to be able to overcome the actual objection and truly negotiate, because you're not negotiating from a point where you're fighting blindly. You're fighting what the actual problem is. Well, perfect. Now they picked an option, right? We're going to move forward to the next part, because now they picked an option, but the battle's not won yet, because you still got to submit that application. There's 2 very important key pieces of information that you need to be able to close this policy. The first one is being their social. Social security is obviously a hot topic. A lot of people don't want to give it over the phone. Granted, we talked about establishing trust with confidence. You've established emotion, you've built doubt, you've created urgency already. So you should be able to get the social fairly simple. But you never know, so you want to play it safe. How do you play it safe? We have a disclaimer that we'll be able to send to you when you watch this training, that you're going to read them the disclaimer. You're essentially, the disclaimer basically covers that they are protected by HIPAA, that any other information that they provide me, that anything that comes back on their medical records will not be shared with me or anybody else, as that is only for the carrier in order for them to determine whether they want to provide you coverage or not, and that the HIPAA law protects them under state to make sure that doesn't get out. Does that make sense? They're going to say yes. I'm going to tell them just like this, what's your social? You don't have to make up this entire shabam of like, I'm not going to see it ever again. Less is more. You read the disclaimer, you ask them if they agree. So in something that we actually added to the disclaimers, you're going to ask them for their verbal agreement on the recorded line, right? So you're going to tell them, if you agree, please state your first and last name and state I agree. Actually, that was the key to the whole thing. Sorry, I haven't done this training in a while, but the key to the entire thing is, after you tell them the whole statement is, if you agree, please state your first and last name and say I agree. They're going to say, Bob Myers, I agree. Okay, perfect, Bob, what's your social? 595, they're going to spit it right out. Why? Because you've already established trust, and now you read them a disclaimer on a recorded line like, dude, and obviously it's life insurance. They need it. They know they need to give it away, but sometimes there's always that trust barrier, which is why it's so important that you're confident when you speak. Once you get the social, you get the beneficiary, you get all that stuff, now you need the bank account. A lot of people are scared of asking for the bank account. And the number one mistake I see with asking for the bank account is people are using the post dating as a closing tool. Well, listen, Bob, we need to make a payment for this, but we can push it out as far as 2 Fridays from now. And they haven't even asked you to push the payment out. And in ours, one, they're not protected so the payments goes through. And two, you're not getting paid so that payment goes through. So why the hell will you lead with pushing it out 2 weeks? You're hurting them and you're hurting yourself. What you're going to do is the following. Hey, Bob, thank you for that information. Bob, listen, I'm almost here at the end of the application. I'm about to submit the application now. If you get approved, Bob, the Mutual of Omaha, Miracle, whoever the carrier may be, is going to want to draft the first payment within 1 to 7 business days. Is that okay with you, Bob? Bob's going to say, yes, that's okay with me. If Bob says it's not okay with him, you probably already uncovered that on the when you were getting the objections earlier. At that point, obviously, you move the payment, but Bob's going to say yes. When he says it's okay, fantastic, Bob. Is this going to be with a checking or a savings account? A checking, okay, I need your routing and account number. And Bob's going to give you that account number. Because Bob knows that he needs to pay for this stuff. You cannot be scared of asking for the banking information because nobody on planet Earth tries to shop for something and doesn't think they need to pay for it. Don't be afraid of asking. Don't leave with post dating. Tell them they're going to get drafted within 1 to 7 days from approval, which is actually the policy with the carriers. And just ask them directly for the banking info. They're going to give it to you. You're going to submit that application and you're going to get them approved, protected, and you're going to get paid. That is how you complete a sale from beginning to end. Now, here's the deal. You complete the sale, you get your 9-month advance, but the client needs to stay on the books for their family to be protected and for you to keep your commission, because obviously we're in a space that charges you back if you don't keep the clients, so retention is really important. So there's a few things that you want to do for retention. And when people ask me what are your keys for retention, I'm about to list some of the things that we do that help us retain clients. But the most basic one, when they call pickup, more often than not, and I was guilty of doing this in the beginning of my career too, is somebody calls and you automatically assume they're calling to cancel, so you don't want to answer. Let me break you how stupid that is. One, if they're calling to cancel and you don't answer, you're just going to call the company and cancel anyway. And now you have no shot of trying to save the policy. Two, typically they're not calling to cancel. They're calling for something stupid, in a lot of cases even to give you a referral. So if a client calls, answer. If you're busy, text them that you'll call them as soon as you can. But do not ignore your current clients because you're afraid that they're going to cancel. Because if you ignore them, they might have not been calling to cancel, but now since you don't answer, the next agent that comes by that does answer, they're going to cancel your policy and go with theirs. You've got to answer your client's call. Aside from that, man, things that you can do is I will mail a kit to every client, physically mail a kit with a policy summary that I also email to them that you'll be able to get a copy of in their drive. And I created these little flyers, one of them thanking them for the business and another one asking for referrals, which we could share with you guys so you guys could see what they look like. You want to be as personable as possible. Policies do take a while to come in the mail sometimes, or sometimes they just get digitally. And since what you're selling is air, it's not tangible, you sending them a physical kit is going to help them feel like they actually bought something. And that's what you want to be able to, that's what you want to accomplish with that. That being said, guys, I hope this helped. If you have any questions, don't ask me. Thank you.